Tony Bellew versus Ilunga Makabu for the vacant WBC Cruiserweight World title. It's taking place this Sunday. Yep, this Sunday, not Saturday, Sunday. In the UK at Goodison Park Football Ground. Now, I've watched Tony Bellew ever since his amateur days and seen the vast majority of his professional fights. So I know him as a fighter very, very well. Makabu now, I've seen a few of his fights. I was very impressed with the fact he was able to beat and knock out Machunu. That was a surprise result for me. I'm not going to lie. I did not see that one coming. I thought a guy as skillful and talented as Machunu would be able to deal with Makabu. He couldn't. He got knocked out. Makabu is a fairly rudimentary fighter. Doesn't do anything spectacularly well. He's predominantly a pressure guy, likes to come forward, short punches, combinations. He is a southpaw. He does have some upper body movement, which he displays from time to time. But for the most part, he's fairly methodical. He's not going to be as tall as Tony Bellew. Bellew should have the advantage from the outside. And I'm sure Tony Bellew is going to try and box as much as possible, particularly in the early going in this fight. Tony Bellew has been in a few boring fights, I think it's fair to say. His rematch with Ovil McKenzie was pretty boring. He played it safe. His rematch with Nathan Cleverly was a stinker. His two fights against, who is that other guy from Africa? I can't remember the guy's name. The guy that's about to fight Sergey Kovalev. His name has just escaped me. The light-skinned African guy. It's totally gone out my mind. But anyway, his two fights against that guy were also stinkers. So he's been in a few boring fights. Here against Makabu, as I say, I expect him. Chilemba, that's the guy. I'm getting old now, but eventually the name came to me. Isaac Chilemba, that's the guy Kovalev's fighting, and he fought Bellew twice, obviously, in stinkers. Now, yeah, I think Bellew's going to box. And, you know, sometimes when two big punchers, and although Bellew doesn't have an amazing KO record, he is a puncher. And sometimes when you get two big punchers facing each other, they can cancel each other out because neither guy wants to take a risk. We saw that, for example, in the David Haye Vladimir Klitschko fight. Both guys very tentative because both guys didn't have the best chins. But in this case right here with Bellew and Makabu, I think if something like that is going to happen, Bellew's going to have to make it happen by getting Makabu's respect early. Because all I've seen of Makabu in the build-up to this fight is him being extremely confident and cocky and dismissive of Tony Bellew and his chances. I genuinely don't think that he rates Tony Bellew very highly. And he says he's just going to come over to the UK, snatch the belt, and go back home. That's what he's saying. So, with an attitude like that, I don't think he's going to be afraid of Tony Bellew's power. I think he's going to go right in and try and mix it up straight away. Now, he's not going to come flying out like Mike Tyson. That's not the kind of fighter that Makabu is. He's more of a patient stalker. He don't have the quickest feet. He can punch, but he's not a dynamic puncher. Let's just put it that way. He's not like a David Haye who's explosive, jumps in with these big, powerful shots, or a Mike Tyson, leaping left hooks. Makabu's much more methodical and a bit plodding. So he's going to plod forward and try and maneuver himself into position to let his big left hand go. And he's also a very good puncher, Makabu. So that's something that Tony Bellew's going to have to watch out for. If there is a knockout in this fight, it may be more likely to happen after the halfway point. Because Makabu likes to keep a tight defense. Tony Bellew, I think, is going to box and try and keep it long. So, yeah, I think it's going to take a while for Makabu to get on the inside and force Bellew into a fight. And when that does happen, I do expect there to be a certain amount of fireworks. having looked at Makabu again, I have seen quite a few of his fights, but I've been looking at more of his fights again and rewatching some of his fights this week. I think this is a winnable fight for Bellew. I can see him winning the fight. But at the same time, I understand why the bookies in the UK have Makabu a favourite. I think Makabu is a bigger puncher. I think Makabu is better on the inside than Tony Bellew. I like the way he throws his punches better. I think that his hooks are tighter, they're crisper. I think he's slightly quicker in the pocket than Bellew as well. I think he's a better body puncher. So I can see why the bookies are worried for Bellew and why they're making Makabu favourite. Tony Bellew, whether you love him or hate him, you could never say that Tony Bellew don't have heart. You could never say that Tony Bellew is not a natural fighter through and through. This guy has pure fighting instincts. He's a naturally aggressive guy. He's not intimidated by anybody. Okay, and again, people might not like the way he comes across in interviews and this, that, and the other. But just talking about him as a fighter, he is never going to be an underachiever. Because mentally, he has what it takes. He's more likely to be an overachiever, if anything. You know, he's never going to be an underachiever. So, yeah, he's going to come into the fight with a lot of confidence. He's going to box to a plan. He's going to try to keep Makabu outside, try and get his respect where he can, particularly, you know, after 3-4 rounds, if Makabu is building up a head of steam, Bellew's going to try and bang with him and really get his respect to keep him off. That might play into Makabu's hands. Makabu is quite good at counterpunching on the front foot. Bellew's going to have to watch for that. If he wants to throw big shots, keep them shots straight. Yeah. Don't try and mix uppercuts and all that with this guy too early in the fight. Especially. Sorry. Because Makabu is sharp on the inside and he's throwing shots from the southpaw angle, likes his uppercuts and body shots. And that left hand that he has is very powerful. So I think we're all poised for a very, very interesting fight for the vacant WBC Cruiserweight title. I'm almost reluctant to pick a winner here. I was leaning towards Makabu. But Bellew, with the crowd behind him, with the tactics I think he's going to employ, with the fact that Makabu has never boxed in this type of hostile atmosphere, to my knowledge, certainly not on this type of scale, maybe he'll be a little bit of a fish out of water. I don't know, as I say, what Makabu's like from a mental point of view, taking him out of his comfort zone. I know he's based in South Africa, but he's not South African originally, I don't believe. So I don't know what type of environment he comes from. Obviously, South Africa, there's some extremely rough places in South Africa. Some of the roughest ghettos in the world are in South Africa. And there are people who come from those places that are extremely tough mentally because of certain life situations and circumstances they've been through. Not to say everybody from a ghetto is tough. They're not. There's plenty of, feather duster men, as John Fury would say. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just type in feather duster man, John Fury, and you know what I'm talking about. But there's plenty of feather duster man that come from ghettos too. But there's also a lot of people that have been through extremely tough life experiences who come out of ghettos, and that toughens them mentally and helps them in certain situations in a sport like boxing. So is Makabu one of those guys? I don't know. I can't tell you about that. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the fight. Who am I picking? I might even sit on the fence. This might be one of those fights where I'm going to piss people off by sitting on the fence. People hate when I do that, but it's more honest to sit on the fence than to pick somebody when you don't really know who's going to win. That's not honest. It's more honest to say, okay, I don't know. Rather than say, oh yeah, I know who's going to win. Even on the back of your mind, you're like, I don't know who the hell's going to win. So I'm just being honest. Maybe I'm going to sit on the fence. I was leaning more towards Makabu, but with the home advantage Bellew has, and with Makabu being a fish out of water, I don't know how he'll cope. Maybe he'll thrive on it. Maybe he's one of those kind of guys who loves going into the next guy's backyard Maybe he thrives on the negative energy of the fans booing him the way that Chris Eubanks Sr. used to. Maybe. But I don't know. So I can't make a prediction based on what I don't know. You know? If you guys do have a concrete view or any type of inclination about how you see this fight going, who you think is going to win, then please drop it in the comment section below. I think most people are probably going to go with Makabu. And I think the bookies' odds reflect that. The bookies wouldn't have Makabu a favourite if they hadn't canvassed opinion and found out that the majority of people interested in this fight think Makabu's going to win. I'm sure there'll be some late... actually, no, let me take that. I was going to say I'm sure there'll be some late money on Bellew, but I don't know whether they will. I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you think, people. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.